Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Constructive Conversations. The intention of this podcast is to explore the mindset and actionable strategies that empower entrepreneurs to achieve all-around success while inspiring listeners to confidently pursue their own dreams. The reason I do this podcast is because 10 years ago, I knew I wanted to start my own business, but I had no idea where to start. I had no role models to follow. I didn't know what to do. So the goal is to provide that inspiration for new entrepreneurs and to provide fuel for those who are already doing it. Joining us today is Adam Allen. Adam's the visionary owner and CEO of Prestige Woodworks, based in St. George, Utah. Adam's transformed Prestige Woodworks into a leading provider of custom cabinetry and millwork services. He has a background in CNC machining, a degree in pre-engineering from Dixie State College. He combines technical experience and passion for craftsmanship. So on this episode today with Adam, we cover starting a business from scratch, the entrepreneurial seizure, theory of constraints, batch processing, having lean morning meetings, respecting customers, dealing with people problems, personal branding, surviving COVID with in-home service-based business, meeting your mentors, vertical integration, faith and business. This is a great episode. You're really going to enjoy it. So stay tuned. Make sure you listen to the end. Thanks so much for joining today on the show, Adam.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, appreciate it. So let's take you back to the beginning. Can you talk about what led you to start your journey? What got you into that industry and start your own?
Well, to be 100% honest, it was a lot of boredom and not knowing what to do with my life. In high school, I did have a couple wood shop jobs, and I was kind of a shop nerd. I worked at a place called Wilding Wall Beds for a while that builds Murphy beds. They're awesome. They ship anywhere. Also worked for two different cabinet companies here in St. George. And then I went to college, did my pre-engineering here in St. George, Utah, and in Cedar City, Utah. Then I moved up to the Salt Lake Valley, which I'm originally from, and went to the University of Utah and finished out a bachelor's degree up there. And I was thinking during that time, like, I was just going to go get into some corporate something, put on a suit and tie and go to work every day. And it took like a year for me to realize that sounded terrible. And during that year, my dad had been pestering me like, hey, come back home. One of my firefighter buddies is a cabinet guy, and he's done. Like, he's done with it. It's just a bunch of machinery that's collecting sawdust and spider webs. Come buy the machinery from him and start your own cabinet shop. And I still to this day really don't understand why my dad was pushing me to do that, because I was never one to like go out and start a business. And after a year of like looking at a suit and tie and thinking that sucks, and then having my dad poking me from, a 4-hour drive away, I was like, yeah, I kind of have the winter blues up here in Salt Lake anyways. I want to go back down to sunny St. George, and why not give it a go? So I text one of my old buddies that was my wood shop friend from high school, and I was just like, hey man, you want to go open a cabinet shop? And he's like, yeah, let's do this. So we both moved back to St. George, just jumped right in feet first. It was a messy, hairy deal. We struggled for almost 6 months to get the small business loan to actually afford the machinery, because as you probably already know, statistically speaking, 80% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. So banks really don't want to give you much for that. For the first couple of years, it was just the two of us, and we were just doing what we knew how. Like, we were doing how other businesses did business. As far as building cabinets, we had no idea how to run a business, right? As they say in E-Myth Revisited, we had an entrepreneurial seizure where we're like, hey, we could do this, right? We were technicians jumping into the entrepreneur role. So for those first 2 years, it was kind of just figure it out. Let's go. Let's see what we can do. And then one day, the guy that sold us our hardware, the glides and hinges and handles and stuff for our cabinets, he showed up and he gave me 2 books. He's like, hey, you guys seem like you could work a little bit smarter. And he gave me this book, The Goal by Eliyahu M. Goldratt, which is about the theory of constraints, which, to put it simply, is you have a constraint, a bottleneck, find it, fix it, and then do it again, right? And he gave me another book called 2-Second Lean by Paul Akers, which is, he lives up in Washington State and has a business called Fast Cap. And Paul Akers' mindset is, hey, take all these lean principles from Toyota and apply them to your life, but even if you're only making a change that saves you 2 seconds, it's worth it. But really the big part is make it a habit, do it every single day. So we took those things and immediately started thinking, like, how can we do this differently? We went from just kind of doing all processes at once. So like one day we would paint all of the items or stain all of the items. And then the next day we would cut all the items, right? To avoid setting up the machines multiple times. We went from doing that, which took us, month to get a big, huge custom job done, to figuring out how many cabinets can we potentially build in a day. If we break those processes up into chunks, how many cabinets can I, Adam, actually like cut and build in one day? And we started working on that. And I 100%, to be honest, flipped some weird switch in my brain. I didn't sleep for almost a week, had all these amazing innovations for a while. By the end of the week, I went batshit crazy and my wife committed me. And I went to BMed, which is behavioral medicine, the nut house, for 3 days, because I was off the rocker for sure. But it was just like the simplicity of life just kind of settled in. It's like, oh, build habits to make your life better, stick to them, and your life gets better. Weird, right? So from there, it's just been this crazy growth journey of like, okay, find the next problem, fix it. And while we're doing that, we are going to keep these weird little cultish, lean habits of every day we have a morning meeting and we talk about lean things and we talk about core values. And then right after that, we have 30 minutes of lean improvement time where we just go out and try to improve the processes that we're working on. And it's been amazing. My brain got stuck for a long time on the tricks of the trade, on the little processes and trinkets and gadgets. And it's just been over the last year or so that I've realized more and more that all of that really is just a reflection of respect for humans, respect for your customer, respect for your employees, especially. So my mindset has been slowly shifting away from the technical tactician work, right? Like, how to do all that stuff too. And sometimes when you're good at the work yourself, you get sucked into it really hard. And it takes a lot to like let go of that grapevine and give it to the employees and focus on them. So that's kind of the part of the journey I'm on now, trying to figure out how to stop being a technician and start being a true leader. But it's been a crazy fun journey so far.
Amazing. So I'm really intrigued. I want to double click on this. Your wife committed you to an institution after you started having these realizations. Yeah. Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah. So the very first night, the reason I couldn't sleep is because it started to click that, if I could predict the amount of cabinets we could get out in a day, then I could give a customer a reasonable timeline, which most trades can't, right? I could actually potentially predict our income, which most trades can't. And I could just predict my timelines for my poor wife too. That was one big thing, is she'd call me all the time and be like, hey, babe, when are you going to be home? And I'd look at the clock and I'd be like, I don't know, 5. And then she'd be like, all right, so see you at 7 or 8. And I'd be like, sure, fair enough, I guess. And then every job, by the end of the job, me and my business partner, Danny, were pulling all-nighters because we're just came down to crunch time and we're finally trying to get it done. And I was just so sick of that. Like in lean, they call it mura, which is imbalance. I was sick of the imbalance, right? The peaks and valleys of working my butt off and then looking for work. Like, oh crap, what do I do next? So switching the mindset from trying to do the entire process at once to just the cabinets, like try to figure out how many, like snapped my brain. And I stayed up all night creating a spreadsheet. Like, okay, if I can do this many frames in a day, and then I can potentially go up and plan cabinets for the next day. And I tried to figure out this process, kind of like your flow charts that I watched you work on there. But okay, with only 2 of us, how do we make this work and cycle around each other? So I just stayed up all night making that spreadsheet, and like night by night, I kept trying to figure out like that next step. And I'd go into work and we'd like de-junk and do crazy stuff. But by the end of it, I was legitimately crazy. The first doctor I met with, he's like, hey, I've only seen this in like military people who have stayed up for a really long time, but basically you are dreaming while you're awake. I was like, movies started becoming reality to me, and I was in the movies, basically in the Matrix, and I was like, yeah, freaking crazy by the end of it.
Yeah, it's so totally sleep deprived. Yeah, and then blur the lines between reality and not. Wow, that's
Yep.
interesting. So this like click, was that shortly after reading the book by Yahoo Goldratt, The
Yeah.
Goal?
So I read those two books back to back, The Goal and 2 Second Lean. And The Goal, like, I love it because it's a story, right? It helps you relate to it better. In fact, in the very beginning of the book, he says, like, basically, he wishes all textbooks were written this way because it helps you connect to it. So it connected well, but the process of finding my bottleneck was obscure. Like, I had no idea what that even meant. But then jumping into that 2 second lean mentality of just giving myself some time and some focus to do it every single day, I was like, oh, these two tools together are going to do some magic.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I had, a similar but less intense experience when I read that book, The Goal, and like my experience is like a lot of meditation and yoga, and I was like, this is like Kundalini energy coming up, and that's like almost what you described is like, this manic energy, and you just like people stay up for days. But yeah, very interesting that was your experience. Yeah, and so what does that look like today in your day to day? How have things changed since you implemented this lean mentality? So you talked about you have a morning meeting. Is that with everybody on the team will meet and do the lean meeting in the morning?
Yes. So, very first thing in the morning, we meet, we do stretches for a few minutes, and then each employee per rotation. So, right now we have about 15 employees. So, it's roughly once a month. They will give a presentation, and it's just a rough structured slideshow. I give them pretty open liberties to kind of play with it, move the slides around, try and make a theme out of it. But we'll take like a lean quote and we'll talk about that stuff from like Toyota, Taiichi Ono, but we do spread out into just like general philosophy quite often. Mahatma Gandhi was just the other day on there. So a quote, and then we throw in stuff straight from the Toyota manufacturing, which is like the 5 S's and the 8 deadly wastes. And then we get into personal goals. That was one big thing that as soon as that clicked in my brain, you'll notice that pretty much anybody who's starting to figure out life figures out that it's not just about business. It's really about personal growth for yourself, for your employees, for everybody. So I'm pretty big on that. Once I read those two books, those were the first two books I had read probably since high school. So it had been 4, 5, 6 years since I had even read a book.
That's a good start. Those are two good ones to start with.
Yeah. So that started a spiral, which has never stopped. I'm reading 1 or 2 books a month at least. And part of that morning meeting is trying to, cultivate that in our employees as well. So we have them set goals, just personal goals, whatever the heck they are. It can be work related, it can be personal related, and they don't have to get too like in depth with it. I don't make them share their personal life story if they don't want to, but they'll be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to work on communication this month and I want to read this book about communication. We're like, great, good job. And it's really fun because obviously everybody's at a different level in their life, but we don't judge each other according to the other person. It's like, hey, how was your last meeting? Was it better than the last one? Like, are you making progress? Wonderful. Good job.
Awesome. That's great. And how do you see that reflected in, like your product, what you're able to do if you look around at your competition? Yeah, what do you see as the impact of going through those meetings and that process and presentations?
Yeah, it causes people to think, right? Sadly, not super normal these days for people to use their minds instead of their hands. Most people, if you just look at average US citizen, and this is hopefully not a slight on everybody, but you wake up, usually almost late for work, hurry and grab your coffee or your drink or run to the gas station or Starbucks or something on your way to work. Hurry and grab that thing that's going to keep you awake for a little while. You get to work, you do what you're told for 8 hours straight, and then you come home, and what's the first thing you do? You crack open a beer or something, and you sit down in front of the TV, and you do what you're told. And basically, you're numbed from wake up to go to sleep, and all you're doing is following some rhythmic ritual that was set by your external like senses, not necessarily by you. So
Yeah. Yeah, just getting
making these
carried along by circumstance. There's no active decision making. Yeah.
exactly. So making these guys sit and think each month, like, okay, what have I done over the last month? Do I want to do something bigger and better with my life? And often it does create a path where people end up leaving me, and I'm okay with that usually. If they leave to go do something like worse, like I'm just gonna go leave and work for another wood shop, it's like, okay, great, whatever, like peace out. I don't want to see you again. But if they leave to make their life better, I'm like patting them on the back, like great job. Like recently we had this girl, she came to us from another wood shop. She was a recovering addict. And within just a few months of working with us, she started reading books because I make them read books. It's part of it. And something snapped for her. And she came to work one day, and I do a lunch with each employee once a week. So it's about once a quarter that I meet with every employee. And we sat down, and I could see that she was shaking. And I was like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "I'm gonna quit." And I was like, "Oh gosh, what's up? What's the matter?" And she's like, "I love you guys, and I really have enjoyed being here, but I think I figured out what I want to do with my life. I want to go back to school and be a lawyer." And I was like,
Wow.
"Awesome, great for you." And she then just started bawling because she was like, "Really? You're okay with it?" And I was like, "Yes." And since then, we've even worked out a deal because she doesn't go to school every day. So she works Mondays and Wednesdays. She's at work today.
Mhm.
And she is like the brightest, happiest person in the entire business now because she's super grateful for learning and growing. And when she comes to work, it's like a mind break for her. So it's almost like just pure fun. And she's always like, "I love being here. Thank you. It's so fun."
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. How could you not, be happy and supportive of somebody, yeah, pursuing their goals and what their right fit is? That's awesome. So is that something like it's you and your business partner, right? Who run the company?
So my business partner ended up leaving us a few years ago. He just kind of
Okay.
hit, like he got a divorce, hit a midlife crisis, just kind of a crazy big thing for him. We're still friends. He actually left and started a trim carpentry company because he likes the tactical work. He likes to get out and make pretty things. And once it started getting more and more business like, he wasn't loving it. And then when his like world came tumbling down around him, he was like, "I just want to get to work. I want to work with my hands. I want to make beautiful stuff." So honestly, it was kind of like best case scenario for me because all business partnerships eventually end, and most of the time poorly. And in this case, we were able to keep our friendship, and we still see each other quite a bit to this day.
Okay, yeah, that's good because I was gonna follow that up with so that's like a decision you made intentionally. Like you encourage your team to read books, yeah, to pursue their individual goals. Was there like a resource or a mentor that led you to say, oh yeah, we should implement this, or how did that those ideas
Yeah,
come up?
kind of. So this guy, Paul Akers, Washington State fast cap, he has in his morning meeting, they actually read like a chapter of a book, which kind of takes a long time. And he's really big into history and politics. Like he wants his people to know why they're free, where they live, how it's amazing. And we kind of took just a slight spiral on it. And we're like, hey, instead of doing this in the morning meeting, which it could be better in the morning meeting, maybe because we could have some chit chat about it, but it was really hard to get people like awake reading a book at that time in the morning. So we just said, hey, we're going to read a book of the month together. And for like 8 years, we assigned a book and we're like, this is what we're reading as a business. And just this last like 2 months is all. I changed it because I finally realized I was like, the reason I want this for people is because I want them to grow. And I realized I was forcing them to read books that I liked and I wanted to read. And I'm on a completely different like part of my life than they are. So I switched our morning meeting to have a slide where they just report back on the book that they're reading. But it is still required in our employee contract that you're reading a book each month to develop yourself. So now I've opened it up a lot more to them. That way they can, in fact, be like, hey, you know what? I'm struggling with this in my life, or I want to make this better in my life. So I'm going to go find a book about it. Great. Like, great job.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I agree. People in different journeys of their life need to read different things. I've brought books to people. You have to read this. This is so amazing, and it does nothing for them because they're not not at the same point I'm in. So So
Yeah.
that's good. I might steal that and implement that here, because yeah, I love the sound of that. And so sort of going back over your growth journey up until where you are now, what can you talk about maybe the biggest obstacle or some of the biggest challenges that you came across? How did you get past those when challenges came up like they do in business?
Yeah. So honestly, I think for every business person, the challenge that you face more than anything is people, right? Processes and products and all of those things are like, they're easy. You line them up, you do the work, it gets done. And if you do it the same way every time and then tweak it to make it a little better, it's super predictable. People are tricky though. People are variables. They change all the time. And depending on the day and how they're doing that day, they could be a very different person than they were yesterday. And I think the biggest obstacle for me was, again, to detach myself more and more from that work so that I could actually focus on the people and try to figure out that aspect of life, that human element, right? That is the most important element there is. So that journey has been probably like fraught with the most struggle and tears and everything. The very first two employees we hired were brothers, and they were actually friends from high school as well, and we loved them. We saw them through a lot of hard times right when they started working for us. One of them almost got a divorce and had some drug addictions, and we kind of saw him through that. And then their dad died while they were working for us, and we kind of saw them through that as well. But we had a lot of internal struggles because I was like, hey, processes, like we're figuring these things out, these lean things, and we want to figure out how to have standard operating procedures and all this stuff. And it started to felt restrictive to them. And I didn't know how to lead them yet. So I said things that were not great. I remember one of them was talking to me about filling his shoes in the shop because he was serving as shop manager at the time. And they were talking about potentially leaving to start their own business. And he's like, how are you going to fill the shoes? You know, who's going to do that when I'm gone? And I said, what shoes, man? There's no process. There's nothing for someone to fill in for other than just stand there and watch. Like you're doing good things, but how do I teach somebody to do that? And it came across as like, you're not doing a good job. And so instead of them potentially leaving us in the near future to start their own business, they left us the very next day to start their own business, which it kind of sucked. And I've had a lot of that over the years where they tell you when you start to get into that mentality, you should expect turnover because you're trying to escalate, you're trying to raise that bar, right? And a lot of people don't want to. A lot of people just want to settle back and say, no, I'm just here for a job, right? I'm just here to do my work. All that extra stuff sounds terrible. I don't want to read a book. I graduated high school, right? I've literally got those comments from people. And I had to learn to be okay with that, to be okay with letting go of those people. And it's been a weird growth journey of like slowly losing all of those people who don't want to do those things. And guess what? They're great people. It doesn't make them a bad person. I love them all still. They're still great employees elsewhere, but it wasn't what I was looking for, which it's made me stronger for sure, but it was a lot of battles and tough times.
And yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah, dealing with people is the big challenge, and the communication that comes along with that, right? Because they're so different. So what did you gain from that? So like, how is your approach different now? So whether, in like hiring and finding the right people and communicating your expectations.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I like to just weed pretty much everybody out that's unwilling. So I actually make them as a pre-interview process. So this is before you even come hang out with me. You have to read the book 2 Second Lean, which it's a 4-hour book if you're listening to it on audio. And I send this all in a text to the person with a link to the YouTube video because it's free on YouTube. So they have to read 2 Second Lean, and then they have to send me a 1 to 2 minute video of themselves that explains what they liked most from the book, what they already do similar to the book, because lean is just a word. Like, if you want to wrap it up and put a bow on it, and pardon my French, it's just give a shit. Like, to be 100% honest, it's working smarter, not harder. So I make them tell me what they already do similar to that, because most people already have some innate like sense of, hey, I don't want to work harder. Like, why not figure out a better way? And then I make them tell me what they could potentially do better in their lives based on their learning. And last but not least, I have them do some sort of little improvement based on what they learned and show me the little before and after. So most of it ends up having to do with some little process in their life, like getting ready in the morning. Like, hey, I organized my drawer so that my comb and my gel and my toothbrush and my toothpaste are all now lined out in order. Something along those lines. Really simple, but it shows a lot of effort. And if they're willing to do that, I'm willing to give them the time of day. And most people are not willing to do that. So it kind of just gets rid of all of the people who aren't.
Yeah, that's a quick filter. Yeah, I could see that being really efficient right off the bat, just with a text message. That's great.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really great strategy. And then on the flip side, so yeah, since starting your business, what's one of the greatest successes? Maybe something you weren't expecting, like a positive outcome that's come from your whole entrepreneurial journey.
Again, going back to people, like the more I figure out how to work with and for my people, the more I learn how to communicate with them better. And recently, we've had a lot of people communicating more and more about positions they would rather work in, other people who would be better to work in certain positions. So I'm doing my best to, listen and grow with my team. And it's been nice because people are shifting around. We're sharing processes instead of just saying, hey, this is perfectly your job, do it or die. It's like, hey, this part of my job doesn't make perfect sense. Shouldn't this person do it? And then we sit down and have a chat. And it's been really nice because we're reorganizing and we're trying to target like the dreams of what the people want to do. So for example, my designer, Hannah, she loves design. She loves to make the pretty thing on the computer and then see it in real life. But 90% of her day is like data entry more than design, because she'll like put some things together and then she'll have to figure out which cabinets go in there, how much they cost, create the list, do all these things. So we've been working really hard at trying to kind of make those things easier for her and strip them from her so that we can push her more and more into what brings her joy.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I like that. I like that you come back to people again. And yeah, it's not just a business skill. Everywhere you go, you have to communicate with people. So that's, yeah, super valuable. And on that note, where are you learning your skills and improvements? Like, do you have mentors? Do you have, your like business, sort of role models that you look up to?
Absolutely.
Who's been helping you along your journey?
Yeah. So again, I love to read. I love to read. And I chase down any knowledge I can. And sometimes I don't like super jive with the person I'm reading. Maybe it's because our lives don't line up. Like I've studied a lot of Darren Hardy. I don't know if you know who he is. He's amazing, but he married way late in life, doesn't have kids. I have 4.5 kids. And it kind of like his teachings are awesome, but I have a hard time applying them to myself because our lives aren't synonymous, right? And so there's a lot of people like him that I've taken stuff from and I've learned from and I've built it into my life. But to find a mentor for me is somebody that like I resonate with a little bit better. So Paul Akers was the first one. As soon as I read his book, I chased him down. I went and toured his factory. He wasn't there that day. I got kind of pissed off. Didn't tell him that. So I scheduled another tour, and it's not a short trip from St. George to Washington State. I mean, we were this close to the Canadian border. We drove across the border to watch a hockey game that night, which was super fun. I am a hockey fan. In fact, I played roller hockey last night until 11 o'clock. Super fun. But so I tracked him down and I talked him into letting me come have dinner at his house and hang out with him and chit chat with him. And I've been in contact with him ever since. So he's been a great mentor. He's got this amazing lean community where every year they have a lean summit in some random part of the world. And last year it was in Ireland. So I went to Ireland with him. I also went to Japan with him and did a study mission tour of like the Toyota factories and stuff, which was amazing. But I went to Ireland and met another guy, another author, of a book called Improvement Starts with I. His name's Tom Hughes. And we just resonated again. He's got a family. He's like a down-to-earth, blue-collar kind of guy, but he's smart as a whip, has his own business, has his own software business. In fact, Gemba Docs, it's amazing. It's for standard operating procedures, super easy to use by the guys on the floor. And I started talking to him, and I was like, hey, man, you should come for me. Come to the US. I'll pay for your flight and just give us some guidance. So he came back in May. And ever since then, we've been on a crazy growth journey because it was really nice. Sometimes when your parents tell you something over and over again, you're like, yeah, whatever, mom. And then, Uncle Jake comes in and says, hey, you should do this thing. And you're like, oh, whoa. And that's kind of how it was with Tom. I felt like I was beating a dead horse on a few things, and Tom came in and they were like, yeah, we could totally achieve that, which was awesome. But then I've been able to lean on Tom quite a bit over the last, half a year. And right before Tom left, he slipped me a book and he's like, hey, read this. I was like, okay, what's this? And it was Buy Back Your Time. And that's how I found you, right, Nick? So read Buy Back Your Time, and I was like, oh my gosh, another amazing person that I resonate with. This guy is super smart, has kind of a crazy upbringing. He's not naturally crazily gifted. He's not coming from super wealthy background, and he has a family and it's present. So yeah, Dan Martell has been awesome so far. I don't know how you feel about it, but I've been super stoked to try to just up my game to that next level. And that coaching, I hope, is going to be the next version of that. And just like all these other authors that I've tracked down, I do have a goal within the next year to go mountain biking with Dan or something, see if I can make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm the same way. I see, Dan Martell as a role model of somebody I want to be like that. Yeah. Who resonates. Yeah. So I think that is valuable. And it's funny you say it about Darren Hardy, because I first read his book. I was probably 18, a long time ago. And same thing. It's just it's not quite the right, vibe or fit from him, even though he does have good content. So I think that is very important point, to have mentors that you can identify with. So you can say, oh yeah, I can get there. They speak my language.
Yes.
But that's really great that you chase them down. You actually go and meet with them. And yeah, Dan Martell, he's Kelowna. It's not far from where I am here. It's 4 hours. So I'm on the same plan to go do the founders hike and see if I can get a halfway or a half a day or a dinner in with him.
Nice.
That's great. On that note of Dan, because one of his big things is working on personal branding at the same time as business. So have you incorporated that? What are your thoughts on personal branding?
Yeah, so that's been a really interesting one for me, because it must be some weird insecurity. I'm not a super insecure person, I don't think. I'm pretty outgoing. It does have a lot to do with the fact that I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, lived in Brazil for 2 years, had to go knock on doors every single day. I would have considered myself a shy person before that. After that kind of just wrecks you for being shy. You got to go talk to everybody. And I learned to love people. In general, most people are good. It was so fun. Even if they didn't want to listen to you, they'd bring you in, they'd give you some soda, a treat, and pat you on your back and see you on your way out, But I have never felt like putting myself out there on any sort of platform sounded like fun. In fact, I avoided it tooth and nail. I have a Facebook. I haven't been active on it for freaking years, so long. The only Instagram account I had was a work Instagram account, so it was just the pretty pictures of the cabinets that we build. So I was definitely hidden in the obscurity. And even the way I do business, it was by word of mouth and going and knocking on contractors' doors and hanging out with them and having lunch with them. So it was very foreign to me. Most of the non-negotiables I already had built into my life. I do a miracle morning. I do 75 hard regularly. So my wife does it way more than I do. She's badass. She's pregnant and still doing it. But some of those things were really easy. Already had them kind of stabilized. But yeah, that personal branding thing, it threw me for a loop a little bit, but I've been having fun with it. One of his non-negotiables is to post 3 stories a day. And I was like, I'm going to have a goal. I'm going to crush it. So 3 stories is my minimum, but I usually try to get upwards of 5 or 6 a day to just it's practice, right? You're figuring out who you are. And it's really fun because as soon as you get on camera, you realize how retarded you feel. You're like, oh gosh, that was terrible. I need to do that differently or say that differently. And you start to refine the way you speak. You start to refine, your life in general. And I've tried, I haven't done it a lot, but I've tried to kind of show both sides of life. I think that's one of the biggest things I hate about social media platforms is it's always the perfect, pretty picture, right? And that is just not life at all. So I remember a couple weeks ago, I posted a video of me. It was actually one of my employees from all the way across the shop took a video of me. I was filling in the spray booth that day, and I was just pissed off because we had this stain come through. And apparently this stain is always a pain in the butt. And the guys in the spray booth have not pushed that information up front. So they were wasting like hours a day when they were doing this stain to try to get it to look right. And I was like, what are you doing? So I went up front and called the project manager back. And I'm like, we got to do something. And it turns out that we were ordering a special stain for this contractor who, to be honest, was already kind of nickel and diming us anyways. And the stain was not from the provider that we usually purchase from. And it was a lesser product, which is why we were getting a crappy process out of it. Mm-hmm. And my employee took a video from me of across the room with my mask dangling off and my face just kind of pissed off. And I was like, dang it, got caught. So I threw it up on Instagram. I was like, you know what? I got caught. I was pissed off. And it was funny because a lot of people were like, you look fine. You don't look pissed off. And I was like, well, that is my pissed off face. So lucky for my employees, I guess. But I just want to make sure that reality stays intact because yeah, make your personal brand great, but like it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time.
But yeah, so you're saying to be authentic about it. So you don't want to just paint the pretty picture. And you're like, yeah, this is the reality. Yeah, I'll get angry and justifiably in that situation, definitely. But yeah, that's cool. So you're still on board. Yeah. So it sounds like you're working on it, and yeah, like your mission trip helped you, sort of get beyond yourself, and then you're keeping up with the daily non-negotiables.
Yep, having fun with it.
Awesome. And then I really like to ask, what are you excited about the future of your company? And what does the future look like if you had to imagine out the next 5 years, next 10 years?
Yeah, good. So one of the things that I've been trying to do a heck of a lot better lately, COVID almost shut us down. We went into a downward spiral, cut half our crew, dang near went bankrupt. And for several years, I got stuck in this weird little turtle shell of survival mode. And survival mode is not growth. Right. So even some of my best employees, when I cut a bunch of my employees, I cut all of the newest employees, the least paid employees, the ones who didn't have families to support. So I kept some of the highest paid employees and the ones that have been around the longest, even though it was a struggle to do so because we were struggling financially, like dramatically. And when I was trying to come out of my shell, one of the many mentors in that lean circle, he's like, Adam, you have to paint a picture so effing big that everyone can see themselves in it. They can see their bright future in the future that you're painting. So I've been working really hard over the last, I would say, 8 to 9 months at repainting that picture. I had a really good version of it, but I think the more we learn and grow, the more that picture changes, right? For the better, for sure. But over the next year, I plan on dang near doubling our throughput. And not by cracking the whip, not by hiring a bunch of more guys, but just by being smart. One of the big lean things, the way of thinking about things is cutting your batch sizes in half. So if we rewind all the way back to where it was just me and my business partner, and you imagine us building, 8 to 10 cabinets at a time, try cutting it in half and see if you can do 5 at a time and then cycle through and do 5 more. And it actually increases the overall pace of the business, even though it decreases the quantity of things you're working on. So since then, we've been on this weird spiral of getting to where we now have this like almost line production-esque. Doesn't look like that when you're looking at it, but we've got these little carts that we're pushing through the system, and at first the carts had all of the parts for a single cabinet on it, and we had a tech timer for like 20 minutes that you had to manipulate those parts in your area, whether it was sanding or spraying or building. And we've been slowly cutting that in half, cutting that in half, cutting that in half. Right now, we're cutting it down to a very singular part. It's our quarterly mission to get that taken care of. And we will see an increase of about 50% throughput just by that without any more employees.
Wow.
And we've already tested it. We've already seen the outcome of it, and we know that it's going to work. So that is part of it. Over the next 5 years, I plan on getting, right now we're at about 15 employees. The largest version that I want to picture of Prestige Woodworks itself is about 40 employees. Because the thing I don't ever want to do is basically create a mini franchise inside of my own doors. Because then I'm just doubling all of my potential problems, right? You're doubling the machinery, you're doubling the maintenance, you're doubling the standard operating procedures, you're doubling the manpower, and I don't want that. So I tried to sit down and just envision, like, okay, what's the biggest line production version of Prestige Woodworks I can imagine? And obviously in that there will be some areas where there's multiple people doing kind of the same job. But I focused in on the spray booth because that's kind of a natural bottleneck when it comes to dry times. And I was like, okay, if I had the spray booth lined out so that I basically have one person per finish coat and a little booth for each of them, if I had that, so 4 booths and 4 people, what's the biggest version? And it comes to about 40 employees total. 5-year goal is to hit that. And hitting that could put us minimum at triple our throughput, maximum about 10x, which is, and who knows, right? That's maximum based on today's understanding. But that's kind of where I'm headed with it.
Awesome. That's great vision. Well, yeah. How do you feel when you imagine that, when you're picturing that 10-year, the 10x vision in 5 years?
Yeah, it feels amazing because part of that vision too, I'm already working on it. Part of that vision is deciding what the CEO of Prestige Woodworks functions like. So I've been working on creating kind of a standard operating procedure for that. And in my mind, and this is totally random and different from anybody else, but I think the CEO of Prestige Woodworks should be someone who is basically an in-house consultant for their own business. So I'm developing that right now. And part of that 5-year plan is to exit Prestige Woodworks so that I can then start to build other businesses around it. So vertically integrated businesses where it's like, okay, let's start making our own cabinet doors. Let's take on countertops. Let's take on anything that's directly connected, potentially even contracting, so that we can line these things up faster, quicker, better, more efficient, more respect for employees and more respect for customers. That's what we're after.
Amazing. Yeah. I get excited about ideas like vertical integration, right? Because then if you have, your operation is lean and efficient, but the other aspects that are going into, say, a kitchen might not be. So if you can be running that, then you'd have an extremely efficient operation. So yeah, I can see that as very exciting.
Yeah, it is. And I think another part of my growth journey has been realizing that I obviously don't have to do all of that alone. We've found several people in town who have at least some minimal level of that, like lean mindedness or give a crap, where they're trying to make things better. So there's a countertop company in town that's awesome and always striving for better. One of our favorite contractors that we stick to is always striving to make their processes better. So it's not like I'm going to go out and try and like build the entire construction world by myself, but at minimum, I'm going to start roping in good people. We even found a trim carpenter in town like yourself that we're like, dude, you're a killer one. Like, we'd keep you on our team forever. So building that team, whether with my own hands and my own people that have been grown through Prestige Woodworks, because I kind of envision Prestige Woodworks in the future as like a school. Like, you go through Prestige Woodworks and you graduate out into something else, or you stay in there if you find something you love.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and then you're developing people, and they're still going to be in the same industry, so you still get that back. It comes around eventually, right?
Yeah, and you get paid instead of going into debt.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great idea. So I'm excited to see your vision unfold over the next 5 years. That'll be fun to watch. And then, we're getting towards the end here. But one question I like to ask, and you mentioned your mission trip to Brazil is, so does, religion, spirituality play a role in, in your business and your entrepreneurial journey, and to what extent?
Absolutely. I think I would dare say most entrepreneurs who are truly entrepreneurs, as far as not just chasing a dollar, believe that there's some bigger purpose in life, right? And entrepreneurs should make a lot of money. They freaking work themselves to the bones night and day to try and figure life out. But I believe that my faith has a huge influence, not a little one, a huge influence on what I'm trying to accomplish. I've had so much pushback from friends and families and even employees about like trying to get employees to set goals and grow. Because it's like, why do we do this at work? That seems like a waste of time. Let's get to work and make more money. It's like, dude, it's only this much of life. Like, it really is. And if I can convince you to just make your life better, whatever it is you want, I don't care. I've got kids that are like, I love D&D and I want to build a D&D table. Awesome, dude, do it. That sounds like so much fun. You are going to enjoy the heck out of your life. Make it better. So if I can convince people to make their lives better, at minimum, I've made an impact in their life. And it may not be like I'm out there being a missionary for my church and trying to convert them and get them baptized and do this, but in my belief system and in the belief system of my church, it's basically like all good people are going to be saved eventually, like especially the ones that really try to be good. And I do believe that most people try to be good. We're just more and more and more, we're numbed by the world around us and the external sources of thought and the stuff, right? Just distraction after distraction after distraction. And if I can pull them from the distraction a little bit and let them look at their lives and make them better, I've achieved something. Like at minimum, it's something, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. And I agree that, I see that increasingly among entrepreneurs, and the more I get to talk to, very high level entrepreneurs is that faith is, it's there, and it shows up in lots of different forms. But yeah, it's almost like when you get to that point, like I don't know what it is, like they wouldn't have got there without the faith, right? So then that's, the survivorship bias, like that's the only way to get up there. But it's increasingly common. So, that's
in fact, I'm
thanks for
wearing
that input. Yeah,
my favorite hoodie here. I don't know if you've ever heard of The
nice.
Chosen.
Yeah, I'm watching it right now. Actually, I'm on season 2.
Good. His mission statement was to unite all Christians, which it's funny that Christians aren't united. It's like, oh, you're part of this belief and I'm part of this belief. And that mission statement, like, it flipped a switch in my brain and I was like, duh, like, who cares what religion you are? We should be getting along at like a high level. We should be like, yeah, we're on the same team, bud.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, and I'm continuously impressed by what he's done, as a business, like to create a new model to fund a TV show, crowdsource all of the funding. It's free, like, make it completely accessible. Yeah, I think that's a super original, and like inspired way to go about that, because to what I know, that's never been done before. So very, very cool.
It was really fun. They actually shot, I think, all of season 2 and part of season 3 in Utah, and on sites that our church uses for filming stuff. And so it was kind of fun. We saw a lot of familiar faces in those seasons, and it was like kind of exciting. Like, yeah, that's home.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. Awesome. All right, Adam. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I think our listeners are going to find this super valuable. This is great conversation. So thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Before we go, I'll just show I did do some homework before I jumped on, and I just wanted to say that you and we line up on our core values a lot. I like to see what people value, and I can see in your work that you value respect pretty highly for yourself, your customer, and your employees. You're trying to standardize things, make your customers' lives better. You're doing it right. Like, you're making sure that the job is quality and done right, which a lot of people don't do. A lot of people are like, I'm just in it to make a buck, right? But I see the care that you put into your product, your process, and your people. And I think that over time, that's what's going to sell you. right? That's why people are going to buy from you, is because they can align with your core values. Whether or not they can say that vocally or understand that, it's a gut feeling and a heart feeling. And I can see that in you. So well done.
That's great. I really appreciate it, Adam.
All right, Nick, it was awesome. Thanks for having me, dude.